Hello everyone, this is R.S. Miller at the endtimenews.org and today is March 19th, 2014. The Israeli Air Force strikes Syrian artillery positions. Multiple sources are reporting that Israel has struck the Syrian army within the borders of Syria. IAF warplanes launched an attack on several Syrian military posts early Wednesday morning, killing at least one Syrian soldier and injuring at least 7 others. The airstrike was in response to yesterday's terrorist attack on Israel's border, according to the statement on the IDF's website. The statement read, "Earlier this morning, the IAF struck a number of Syrian military targets in the Golan Heights that aided and abetted the terrorist attack yesterday afternoon, in which 4 IDF soldiers were injured. The targets were a headquarters and artillery batteries of the Syrian military, as well as training camps belonging to the Syrian military. The IAF reserves the right to act in any way at any time it sees fit to protect the residents of the State of Israel." According to another IDF statement concerning the attack on the Israeli soldiers patrolling the Golan border, it stated, "Earlier on Tuesday, an explosive device was detonated against IDF soldiers in the northern Golan Heights, causing the injury of 4 soldiers, one of them severely. Shortly following the incident, the IDF retaliated with artillery fire towards Syrian military positions." On a side note, last week Syria had issued a recall of its ambassadors from Washington. The U.S. State Department then ordered the closing of the Syrian embassy along with 2 consulates, as well as the expulsion of Syrian diplomats from the country. Daniel Rubinstein, the State Department Special Envoy to Syria, said, "This week marks the 3-year anniversary of the Syrian Revolution. For 3 years, Bashar al-Assad has refused to heed the call of the Syrian people to step aside. He has directed a war against his own people and created a humanitarian catastrophe in order to hold on to power and protect his narrow interests." He goes on to say, "Following the announcement that the Syrian embassy has suspended its provision of consular services, and in consideration of the atrocities the Assad regime has committed against the Syrian people, we have determined it is unacceptable for individuals appointed by that regime to conduct diplomatic or consular operations in the United States." Consequently, the United States notified the Syrian government today that it must immediately suspend operations of its embassy in Washington, D.C., and its honorary consulates in Troy, Michigan, and Houston, Texas. Syrian diplomats at the embassy and Syrian honorary consulates are no longer permitted to perform diplomatic or consular functions, and those who are not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents must depart the United States. He went on to say that the United States would continue to maintain diplomatic relations with Syria and continue to assist those seeking change in Syria. Tensions continue to escalate in Ukraine. Another Ukraine military base in Crimea was assaulted today, although there were no reports of shots being fired or injuries. According to reports, armed Crimean defense forces, backed by Russian troops, stormed the naval base in Sevastopol, hoisting Russian flags at the gates. The force then made its way to the base headquarters, and a short while later, hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers were seen dressed in civilian clothing walking out of the building. The evacuation of the base comes shortly after a Ukraine official in Kiev stated that the country's forces would not withdraw from Crimea, even though Moscow had signed a treaty making it a part of Russia. Yesterday, on the 18th, Vice President Joe Biden met with Polish President Bronislaw Komorowski and made the following statement during a press briefing. "They, the Ukrainian people, want a government that serves its people, and they want the right to free expression, the chance to choose Ukraine's path and affiliations as a united nation without fear of coercion. Today, Mr. President, we spoke about a situation that's unfolding in Ukraine. We agreed on the need for the United States, Poland, and our European friends to stand together in supporting Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders, rejecting Russia's absolutely illegitimate claims and steps to annex Crimea, and imposing cost on Russia and Mr. Putin for Russian aggression, while making it clear there is a better path if they choose to take it, and helping the Ukrainian people and their government as they chart a new future. As we proceed, Mr. President, I want to make it unmistakably clear to you and to our allies in the region that our commitment to mutual self-defense under Article 5 of NATO remains ironclad. It is not in question. It is ironclad. And today, Mr. President, you and I spoke about the steps that have been taken in recent days to bolster our security presence in Europe, including deployment of 12 American F-16 fighter jets and hundreds of American servicemen to Poland. As I said earlier today, our missile defense plans continue on schedule, including our firm commitment to place an optional missile defense site here in Poland by 2018. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen has condemned the moves to incorporate Crimea into the Russian Federation. He said, "I condemn President Putin's announcement of new laws incorporating Crimea into the Russian Federation. Russia has disregarded all calls to step back into line with international law and continues down the dangerous path. Russia continues to violate Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity and remains in blatant breach of its international commitments. There can be no justification to continue on this course of action that can only deepen Russia's international isolation. Crimea's annexation is illegal and illegitimate, and NATO allies will not recognize it. I am deeply concerned by reports of the death of one Ukrainian officer. It is urgent that all sides show restraint and take all possible steps to avoid further escalation." Friends, everything is falling in line with Bible prophecy, including the events which are currently taking place in Ukraine. However, I would like to focus on the coming nuclear war in the Middle East. I had recorded this commentary back in August of 2013, and it is just as relevant today as it was then. The only real difference between then and now is that now we are a lot closer. Friends, an absolutely horrific war is about to break out in the Middle East, and soon. I'm talking about a war that will involve not only nations in the Middle East region such as Israel, Iran, and Syria, but also the world's superpowers, Russia and the United States, as well as their allies. This war will in effect be World War III, complete with the use of thermonuclear weapons. This war is in fact developing even as we speak. The situation in the Middle East is rapidly deteriorating. The U.S. is watching Iran's presidential election, looking for moderation just ahead of the state's nuclear breakout status. In other words, Netanyahu's red line. According to Bloomberg, the inauguration of Iran's President Rouhani in 2 days restarts the countdown towards a confrontation over the Islamic Republic's nuclear program as it approaches Israel's red line for military action. On September 27th of 2012, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu drew his red line for Iran's nuclear program. At that time, he said that Tehran would be on the brink of a nuclear weapon in less than a year. Well, that red line time for action is fast approaching, and the probability that Israel will carry out their threat of a strike on Iran is very high. Recently, the Russians have sent advanced weaponry to Syria, which Israel had warned that they would take them out, and they did. Is there any doubt that a nuclear-armed Iran would be perceived by Israel as anything less than an existential threat? And truly, it would certainly be the case. The United States has just closed some of its embassies in the Middle Eastern region and issued a worldwide travel warning. The Brits and the French are also taking similar actions, or at least in Yemen they are. Whether it takes place now or later, nuclear war is coming, and the only thing that can prevent this inevitability is permanent peace with the Islamic world. But the Islamists don't want peace with Israel. What they want instead is Israel's total destruction. The Nation of Islam believes that once land becomes Islamic, it will always belong to Islam, and that true believers must reclaim that land at any and all costs. Their creed is to never give up and never make peace with their enemies. In an effort to continue the quest, much like Adolf Hitler did during his reign in Germany, they instill extremism and hatred in their young people. The Palestinians teach their children that the Jews are to be exterminated, that they are rats and pigs. They teach them how the earth itself will cry out for the death of the Jews. There's a song that Palestinian school children learn which helps to inspire this extremism and hatred. The song contains phrases something like this: a tree cry out, "Come, there is a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him." And the stone says more or less the same thing. Some Palestinian children are sent to summer camps just like American children. But there is at least one major difference. Their kids are taught military tactics for the sole purpose of attacking and killing Jews. Islam intends to conquer the entire Middle East, and that means Israel must go. Even when the young people are learning geography in school, the maps show the state of Palestine. There is no two-state solution. The nation of Israel doesn't exist. The entire landmass known as Israel, Samaria, Judea, etc., as well as Gaza, are all covered in green colors of Islam, representing the nation of Palestine. The rhetoric that comes from the nation of Islam towards Israel clearly shows their intent. The former Iranian president, and more recently the newly elected Rouhani, as well as some of the leading Islamic clerics, including Ali Khamenei, have all stated in essence that Israel must be wiped off the map. Couple these extreme threats coming from Iran, as well as Hamas and Hezbollah, along with Iran's mad pursuit of acquiring a nuclear bomb and the Iranian leadership's well-established propensity towards lying, and you have a highly volatile situation, one that only requires a spark to engulf the entire world. The mostly Western nations are seeking to bring peace to the region don't realize what's really going on. There will be no permanent peace until Jesus comes back. Although there will be the temporary peace of the Antichrist, who is already on the scene, even though he hasn't been revealed yet, it will be short-lived. His brand of peace will consist of a 7-year peace treaty, but will be broken in 3.5 years. Daniel 9:27, speaking of the Antichrist, "Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to the sacrifice and offerings." I believe that the rebuilding of the third Jewish temple may well be part of this Antichrist peace treaty. The Jews will give up East Jerusalem, which they are fervently against, as well as other segments of Israel, for the guaranteed right to rebuild their temple on the Temple Mount. Currently, the Jews have very little access to their most holy site, which is also one of the icons of the nation of Israel itself. Even now, there's a growing movement among the Jews to retake control of the Temple Mount. In return for granting the Jews the right to rebuild the temple, The Palestinians will gain their much sought-after state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital. But of course for them, it's only the beginning of the conquest. For them, peace with Israel is not an option. Now, having said that, let me read to you some of what Shraga Blum, an independent journalist, wrote in an article for I-24 TV. Talks with Israel are simply another way of annihilating the Jewish state. The same day that the talks between the Israelis and the Arabs resumed in Washington, a Qassam rocket fired from the Gaza Strip landed in the southwest of Israel. It served as just a little reminder of the equation that has been governing the conflict since its origins more than a century ago. Terrorism has nothing to do with the struggle for peace, and the so-called occupation, quite the contrary. He goes on to write, proof can be simply deduced by studying the curve of terrorist acts and comparing it with talks or periods of political deadlock. The immediate conclusion is that the idea that negotiations will reduce violence is swept away by the facts. Israel has bitter experiences in this field. It is precisely during periods of intense diplomatic activity or around the signing of agreements that the number of anti-Israeli attacks grows significantly. The most telling examples of those are of the Oslo Accords in 1993, the Camp David negotiations in 2000, or the Gaza disengagement in 2005. Three key dates that mark a clear revival of anti-Jewish terrorism. And paradoxically, in periods such as 1996 to 1999, the first term of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, criticized for not doing anything to achieve peace, the number of terror attack victims was the lowest. How is it then that in a paradoxical way, negotiation periods are accompanied by an upsurge of violence by terrorists? Simply because the perpetrators remind the entire world that the origin and purpose of the conflict is to eventually annihilate the state of Israel. Any solution other than that is unacceptable, and therefore, once they smell the protest of an agreement, even a partial one, they resort to violence. Psalm 83 speaks about these people. In verse 1 he states, "Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people, and consulted together against your sheltered ones. They have said, Come, and let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. For they have consulted together with one consent. They form a confederacy against you, and this is who the who is. The tents of Edom and the Ishmaelites, Moab and the Hagarites, Jabal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia, with the inhabitants of Tyre. Assyria also has joined them." Permanent peace in the Middle East is merely a pipe dream. War is coming, and it's coming sooner than most think. But you might ask, how can I say that it's going to be a nuclear war? Well, without going into much detail, the answer is quite rational. Number one, Israel is not going to simply fade away into the sunset. Number two, the Nation of Islam is not going to tolerate the existence of Israel indefinitely, and their religious beliefs prevent them from making any serious peace agreements. Number three, from a natural perspective, Israel will not be able to stand against an onslaught of modern Arab armies and their allies all striking at the same time. It would in effect be Israel's last stand, If they lose this coming battle, they will lose their nation, and Israel will cease to exist. This scenario would literally put Israel's back against the wall, and that would cause them to launch nuclear weapons. Just ask yourselves this question. If the situation that Israel finds itself facing were reversed, would America, France, or Great Britain push that big red button? The fact is that any country with nuclear weapons in their arsenal and faced with their own extinction from foreign forces would, as a last resort at least, use those weapons. So what makes anyone think that Israel would not do the same? Peace in the Middle East is unobtainable by mankind. The opposite of peace is war. The opposite of love is hate. And the opposite of heaven is hell. Are you saved? If you desire to be assured of your own salvation, then follow the link below and pray the prayer with a sincere heart, and you will be saved. May God bless you.